On the table lies a phone. The screen goes dark, yet the same question keeps spinning inside. Why do so many efforts go to waste? You might be stronger, more composed, and smarter than many around you, but still feel pulled outward to where solutions are dictated by other people's rules. It is at such moments that a person first notices that their strength exists, but it does not work for them. They start to wait for external validation, cling to control, get angry when the world does not obey, and gradually become entangled in their own tension. Then comes a turning point, when it becomes clear that inner strength is not a reason to push against life, but a capacity to see where action is needed and where it is necessary to let go. In these minutes, you will see why the desire to hold everything only intensifies the inner fracture, and what happens when a person stops considering themselves the center of everything. This video will help you look at self-control, at others' time, at your expectations, and at the moment when resistance ceases to be a force in a different way. There is one paradox that is rarely noticed at first. The more a person tries to force life to adjust to them, the faster they lose clarity. They hear only their own tension and no longer distinguish where true will lies and where ordinary stubbornness, hidden behind words about character and determination, is. That is why it is easy to confuse inner strength with pressure. On the outside, it looks like confidence, but inside often lives the fear of losing influence, of not being who one wanted to be, or of facing the fact that the world is not obliged to validate every one of your desires. When this becomes noticeable, the most important turn begins, not to weakness, but to maturity. You will not only recognize familiar pain when everything around seems to mismatch your expectations, you will see where energy is lost, why the same attempts lead to irritation again, and how the state changes when a person stops fighting reality itself. It will become clear why true support begins not with control, but with a more accurate view of oneself and the world around. Today, inner strength for many sounds like a trendy word, but in reality, people more often live on autopilot, reacting to notifications, others' expectations, and the endless noise around them. Because of this, it is easy to confuse living will with the habit of holding everything in one's hands, and clarity with ordinary tension that has simply become the norm. And this is why the topic of inner strength is especially important now. It helps not to be drawn into beautiful ideas, but to regain sobriety in a world where attention is constantly being torn apart. When a person lives solely for external tasks for a long time, their sense of measure dulls. They begin to expend themselves on what provides no support, and they no longer notice how fatigue turns into a lifestyle. In such a state, it is easy to demand even more, even harder, even faster from oneself, although this is often what leads away from true strength. It is no coincidence that so many people today feel an inner emptiness even when fully occupied. The noise around has simply become louder, and the connection with oneself weaker. In these minutes, you will see what this scenario looks like from the inside and why it repeats so often. First, we will analyze why a person so easily gives their power away externally and begins to depend on systems, rules, and others' approval. Then, we will move to the moment where inner support ceases to be an abstract idea and becomes a real skill, managing oneself without self-deception. And in the end, everything will come down to a calmer, yet much more mature way of living, where it is not necessary to break the world to feel one's own worth. There is another important point that many overlook. Inner strength does not grow where everything becomes comfortable. It grows where you stop lying to yourself about the limits of your own capabilities. And this changes not only decisions, but the quality of your presence in life. Therefore, the conversation will not be about beautiful inspiration, but about how to stop being a hostage of external noise and regain the ability to discern when to insist and when it is better to yield. This is not about passivity and not about renouncing will. It is about a more accurate understanding of oneself, which makes any action calmer, stronger, and more honest. As long as a person lives only on the outside, it seems to them that strength lies in the right circumstances, in approval, in clear rules, and in people who will finally arrange everything. But this belief quietly makes them weaker because their attention is constantly focused on what cannot be held. The jaw tightens, the shoulders rise higher than usual, the gaze clings to the screen or the face of another person. And inside, one question echoes all the time. Have I been let down again? Thus, strength stops being a support and turns into an anxious expectation. The false belief here sounds very convincing. If I calculate everything and control everything, then I will not feel pain. In reality, the opposite happens. The more tightly a person clings to the result, the more they depend on how exactly this result will come about. They are no longer acting, but constantly checking whether it has turned out exactly as they wanted. And at this moment, willpower begins to get confused with tension. Willpower knows how to choose a direction, while tension only tightens the body and demands immediate confirmation. This is especially noticeable at work, when a leader cannot delegate a task without inner irritation. They govern every detail because they fear an imperfect outcome, and in the end, exhaust both themselves and everyone around. Or in a normal conversation, when a person decides in advance that the interlocutor must respond correctly, and just a minute later hears not words, but only a threat to their expectations. On the outside, this looks like strength of character, but inside it is most often a fear of losing influence. There is a subtle trap that is rarely talked about. When a person relies only on the outside for too long, they begin to expect from the world a function that they should have developed within themselves. They demand that circumstances give them stability, even though circumstances are inherently changeable. Therefore, any disruption of the plan feels like a personal catastrophe, although in reality, it's not life that is collapsing, but the illusion that life must conform to a single version of your design. It is at this point that the first turn occurs. Strength is no longer about holding everything together, but about enduring the mismatch without internal disintegration. Imagine a person who has been waiting for one answer for weeks and has mentally built their entire next month around it. Then another answer comes, and their palms immediately grow cold. Breathing becomes erratic, and a quick noise starts in their head. If they only look outward, they see it as a failure. If they first notice that their reaction has become larger than the event itself, they gain freedom. Not the freedom to control the outcome, but the freedom not to give it their wholeness. The same can be seen in a quieter form when a person gets stuck waiting for the perfect moment. They postpone a conversation, a decision, a step, because they want everything to unfold without risk. But life is not obligated to reveal itself only at a convenient moment. Sometimes it requires from you not a leap, but precision. And here, a new measure of strength appears. Not to push the world, but to discern where your action is truly needed and where you are just trying to drown out anxiety with activity. If one looks at this soberly, it becomes clear that dependence on the outside world is not about weak character. It is about the fact that a person once learned too early to seek support where it could not exist. Therefore, they tire faster than others. They seem to be constantly holding someone else's weather in their hands and are surprised why their fingers cramp from tension. And when this is recognized, one can no longer believe the old formula that strength is measured by the ability to push everything through. True strength begins where you stop confusing control with stability and for the first time endure reality without internal panic. Try a short test right now that takes exactly 60 seconds. Recall the last situation where it frustrated you that everything was not going according to your plan. And for this minute, just notice what exactly you are trying to hold on to forcefully. Don't correct it. Don't analyze it deeply. Just catch one point of tension in your body. Most often, this is the jaw, shoulders, or abdomen, and quietly name to yourself one word that most accurately describes your impulse. For example, control, fear, or urgency. In just a minute, it becomes clear that inner strength does not begin with pressure, but with recognizing where you have already lost your footing. The most common mistake here is that a person confuses anxiety with decisiveness. They hurry to write, call, explain, achieve, although in reality, they just cannot stand waiting. This is easy to recognize by two signs. After the action, it does not become clearer, and the same tension remains in the body, and also by the desire to receive immediate confirmation, as if everything will fall apart without it. The solution is not to suppress the impulse, but to momentarily separate necessity from panic. When this is successful, the action becomes more precise and quieter. When the topic becomes relevant at work, in conversation, or before an important decision, you don't need to conduct an internal analysis for half an hour. It is enough to stop pushing the situation forward for a few seconds and notice what you are striving for right now. Very often, after such a short stop, it turns out that half of the tension was not held on a real task, but on the desire to instantly regain a sense of control. And it is this observation that changes the quality of the next step. Integrating this into chaos is also quite simple. During a work meeting, in line to submit documents, or on the subway, when there is noise around and no privacy, you can discreetly use those 60 seconds without changing your posture or attracting attention. You press your tongue to the roof of your mouth, gently unclench your teeth, slightly feel your feet in your shoes, and notice how your chest stops pushing forward with each inhale. At this moment, a more collected feeling of space appears in your body, as if it has become half a tone quieter inside. This is enough to avoid acting from automatic tightening. The meaning of the practice is not to become infallible, but to notice earlier where you have already begun to demand too much from life. One honest look at your impulse often saves more energy than an hour of struggling with the consequences. And the more often you return to this short recognition, the easier it is to distinguish real action from the attempt to suppress tension. Inner strength stops being a beautiful idea only when you begin to see its limits. Not everything needs to be carried by you. Not everything can be pushed through. And not every desire requires immediate fulfillment. Maturity begins at the moment when the will remains with you, but the illusion of omnipotence departs, and instead of fighting the world, there emerges a more accurate relationship with it. Today's conversation boiled down to a simple yet unfamiliar observation. The strength within does not cancel out other people, their time, their freedom, and the inherent logic of events. It helps to not get lost in external noise, and not to turn control into a replacement for clarity. When you understand this, tension no longer seems to be a marker of character. it becomes a signal that you are once again trying to take on more than you can truly hold. That is why tomorrow is more important than beautiful promises. It will show where you will again want to speed things up, and where for the first time, you will manage to not interfere unnecessarily and maintain accuracy. Sometimes the most mature step seems almost imperceptible from the outside, but internally, it changes everything because it returns to you the right to act without an inner war. If tomorrow morning you catch yourself wanting to push everything again, that will be the point from which new focus begins. Not loud, not theatrical, but one that allows you to live without unnecessary resistance to reality. If this video was helpful to you, subscribe so you don't miss the next day.